Okay. And I think we're good.
All right, well, welcome everyone to a snowy Zoom call. It's always 72 and sunny on Zoom, but we have a fairly busy agenda tonight, so we'll get right to it. First, we have a presentation on the New York Stretch Energy Code from NYSERDA and the Clean Energy Commission Coordinator, I believe.
Right, and so Anil, give me a second to promote people to the panelists.
Sure.
Okay. Give me a second here. Hey, Anila. So the only other, I think the other person, maybe Mike knows, Sam may have been joining on, and I don't see him in the audience, so to speak. So if he does come on, or I do have a call-in user, so I don't know who that is, but if he signs in with Zoom, regular Zoom, I'll see him and I'll promote him to be a panelist. Okay.
Otherwise, welcome. Thanks for being on tonight.
There we go.
Thank you. So my name is Anila Cherian, and I am, as Larry mentioned, the Clean Energy Communities Coordinator for the Mid-Hudson region. I work with Hudson Valley Regional Council with my colleague Carla Castillo, who some of you may have known. She used to have responsibility for Westchester municipalities. I have now been assigned responsibility for all the towns and villages of Westchester. And I happen to be your neighbor. I live in Dobbs Ferry, and I do know the Irvington community. So firstly, I just want to begin by saying kudos to all of you for meeting in the middle of a snowstorm and in already adverse circumstances to discuss clean energy. Now, I had prepared a presentation which I shared with Larry ahead of time.
Yep.
Just by way of background, in my free time, I have volunteered with my friends in Dobbs Ferry as part of a sustainability task force. And we recently adopted, before I came on board as a clean energy coordinator, New York Stretch. But I wanted to, Larry, this is the New York Stretch presentation. If you could just upload, yeah. So I just wanted to quickly take 1 minute or 2 minutes of your time to explain for the broader public in Irvington the rationale for New York Stretch, which is that, you know, you have a very hardworking, of course, board of trustees and a very hardworking village administrator who has been actively trying to engage the village of Irvington on climate smart communities, as well as NYSERDA's clean energy community. And so my presentation that I shared with you guys, with Larry ahead of time, was focused on the clean energy community piece. And Larry's quickly screen sharing. And I'm not going to go through all the slides, but I just wanted to reference for your, for the broader public, the importance of engaging with the clean energy communities designation. Now, Irvington, Larry, if you would just be so kind as to advance the slides. So the reason why Irvington and many other municipalities across New York State are engaged in New York Stretch and a variety of clean energy actions is because they want to engage with the climate CLCPA. And if you look at just this one goal, 70% renewable by 2030, that is quite a challenge. So I'm just going to skip through a couple of slides. Larry, thank you so much. I'm not going to, the clean energy communities, you can look at this at your leisure. It's a NYSERDA program. So Larry, the next one, please. So there's a lot of benefits that I would like Irvington to think about, which is the potential for getting funding. NYSERDA had launched a clean energy communities grant cycle previously, and it's much anticipated and expected. And NYSERDA will do is expected to do a launch of a new grant cycle. We are not at a liberty to say when, because NYSERDA will control that launch, and many communities across New York State are anxiously awaiting it. But it is a great opportunity to engage on clean energy and climate smart actions. So the next slide, please. So just by way of reference, the village of Hastings-on-Hudson, the village of Dobbs Ferry, the village of Ardsley, some of your neighbors have earned clean energy community designation. And Irvington is well on its way as well. So you have to get 4 out of 10 high impact action items. And this is what the context is for New York Stretch. So I'm just providing a quick snapshot view. Thanks, Larry. The next slide. So this is just a sampling of the 10 high impact action items. Now, some of these might be replaced when NYSERDA launches its new grant cycle. But the village of Irvington, for example, has engaged, you'll see on community choice aggregation, and I have another slide that specifies which ones you've done. Thanks, Larry. So it's a very simple website and portal to engage with. And I don't want to belabor this anymore, Larry, so let's move on. 43 designated CECs in the mid-Hudson region spread across 7 counties. And so the next one, Larry, thanks. So just to tell you that Irvington has undertaken 2 CECs, clean fleets and community choice aggregation, along, based on Westchester Power's new electric service agreement. But you can see from this slide a snapshot of the other Westchester clean energy communities. Thanks, Larry. So we're here this evening to consider the issue of New York Stretch Energy Code. And Mike DeWine and Marilyn Dare lead the team on. Marilyn is not able to be here today, but she leads the NYSERDA team on energy codes. But Mike is an expert and has trained many of the energy code officials across the mid-Hudson, if not New York State. And I'll let him specify more about the New York Stretch Energy Code. But let's move on, Larry. So I included this slide because Larry's been doing a stellar job in trying to engage the village with the Climate Smart Community Portal. And what I wanted to share with community residents is that the Climate Smart designation and the Clean Energy Communities portal are two. The Climate Smart is run by the New York State DEC, and the CEC is a NYSERDA program. As I mentioned earlier, NYSERDA is going to launch a new grant cycle. So it would really be important for multiple reasons for the Village of Irvington to engage with New York Stretch and other clean energy high impact actions. Not just because it will allow you to also engage with Climate Smart, but also because it will put you in potential for the potential of grant monies. So I'm almost done. And so if you have any questions, Larry knows how to get me. And I look forward to working with all of you. And I want to hand it over to Mike DeWine.
Thank you, dear.
Okay, Mike, do you want me to put up the?
Larry.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Larry. It might actually be easier for me to share my screen.
Okay.
And control the program if we can do that. I'm going to give it a shot right now.
You should be able to.
I have it. Yeah, I have it loaded up. Of course, I'm not finding it right this second. There we go. And if we do need to back up to look at various slides with questions and what have you, I can do that easily. Everybody got me now?
Yep.
Okay, and thanks. Thank you, Anila, and thank you, folks, for having us on tonight to talk about the New York Stretch Code that you're wanting to take a look at in the context of the CEC program and in and of itself as well. There's a lot of terrific reasons why this is a good consideration for you folks. I'm sorry, this thing's doing some crazy stuff here. It's this auto. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're in presentation mode, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but I wasn't doing it. So anyway, there's a number of good reasons to consider the New York Stretch Code. And again, it's set up so that it's readily adoptable as your energy code as an overlay to the 2020 Energy Code of New York State, which is the code that you are currently enforcing as of March this year. It's authorized by Article 11 of the Energy Law some years ago. In fact, the first year it was brought into implementation as a way that municipalities could enable a more efficient energy code in their communities. And then, of course, we built it up as a standardology to drop over that 2020 Energy Code chapter and verse so that it would be very easily implemented in the same manner that the base energy code is adopted. And one of the advantages, of course, is to allow you to get ahead of future code cycles, which will be changing again in another year to 2 years as New York comes in pace with the national model code development. It's not, it's nothing rocket science per se. It integrates, current off-the-shelf technologies and best practices that have been, programs and worked with in New York State and around current practice today as builders, developers, and such are currently building higher performance homes. It's only about 11% more efficient than the current energy code and does have about an average of 10-year simple payback. Many benefits, as I mentioned, to the communities. It has a savings around 11%, as I mentioned, over the current code, which, on an energy point, saves money and energy for all the building occupants in New York State, new construction, renovation work, and additions to existing buildings. The paybacks we've talked about, and it also provides greenhouse gas reductions that are consistent over the entire population of buildings being remodeled or added to or built anew, where about 40% of our energy use in general are used in our buildings, with closer to 70% of the electrical energy used, which is in part why you see some movement these days to electrification. Plus, it has a lot of elements in it that make sure that the way the building is designed, it is tested out to work as it's designed and has a higher level of quality assurance around it. I tend to, after over 40 years in this business, promoting building energy codes in New York State, in the region, nationally, and in 2 foreign countries, that the non-energy benefits are actually more important to me in many ways, because those are the areas that resonate with the stakeholders, with the folks that live in your communities and occupy those buildings and homes. It helps assure healthier indoor environments, a biggie today because of our COVID concerns, and the current and New York stretch code go a long way to help provide better indoor environments. Also greater comfort for residents and occupants. The buildings themselves, based on the building science behind the new and always improving requirements, make those buildings more resilient, more durable, less subject to building failures. To me, the other very important component is that, we know, and it's been proven by ACEEE and the Alliance to Save Energy and many other organizations, that the energy saved in community stays in the community. Meaning that the money, the economy built around construction and constructing to efficiency standards gets reinvested here. Plus, there's some quite considerable movement and expansion in green jobs, green workforce expansion, and in particular around the energy codes. Property values increase, tenants and owners save money on their bottom line, and you know that anytime you help save on the bottom line, you're doing better. And there's some interesting opportunities to save the community's bottom line in code enforcement as well by using third party, especially around residential construction. One of the things town of Bedford's been doing for years is they used home energy ratings and raters to assure most of the code compliance work in their community for residences. And now we've worked up another similar process for commercial buildings and projects. The New York stretch has some improvements, fairly minor, in each of these areas covered by the building energy code. But you know, it does have increased insulation and other component savings. It does have improved electrical savings opportunities, higher equipment requirements and controls, and also has a section that enables simple readiness for solar photovoltaic and electric vehicle readiness by building in from the start, when it's least expensive, the capability to add photovoltaics or electrical vehicles, and also equipment efficiencies and such as well. So lots of good options there. Back to the cost benefit, the economic benefit. As an average across state, there's about 7+ percentage savings for the New York stretch code, the incremental cost about $1, and a simple payback about 10 years. Now, it's important to know too that simple payback is just on the construction alone. It doesn't include any incentives there might be. We're still waiting for the CEC program to come out, but we are certain that there will be incentives in that program, as well as just for adopting the New York stretch. We just don't know what the numbers are and what the rules are. But all of this savings data is very conservative, based on the most restrictive way to comply with the energy code, and is calculated before any of the NYSERDA or your utility incentives, your federal and state tax credits, special financing deals that are available. So, you know, results will vary significantly from this. And from what I'm seeing and have seen over the years, you know, the energy code is the only code that pays back for itself. It's the only code that gives the occupants or the homeowners money back in the first month they occupy the building. Now, looking at the results from the climate zone that you're in there, climate zone 4, which is just a line, a demarcation for the state based on your climate. About 70% of all your construction in this zone is commercial building, with energy cost savings about 5.5%, and an incremental cost of 85 cents a square foot. And this is because you know, you have lower requirements for climate zone 4 than other climate zones, because it's not as cold. And again, 11% simple payback, and also again before any incentives. that gap will decrease significantly based on those incentives available from Con Edison, from the state itself, and from all the other opportunities that are out there to get money back for the various energy measures that are required by the New York stretch to get to New York stretch from the base coast. So again, probably best to hold questions for now, but any questions on any of this we can revisit by just dropping back up the presentation. For the balance of New York State in climate zone 4 on the single family and multifamily residential sectors, we're seeing paybacks of about 9 and 10 years with an additional cost of around call it $2,500 for single family and $1,400 for multifamily. And as you well know, and this is all in simple payback terms, those buildings, that are going up, it's single family residence, $2,500 is a drop in the bucket. And again, that will come down with incentives from the utilities and all the other tax credits and other incentives that can be had for construction in your community. Lots of interest, especially running down the Hudson Valley. This doesn't actually include all of the involved communities upstate, but quite a few communities have already adopted. I know it was involved in Dobbs Ferry and Hastings on Hudson, and it was also just jumping on as Beacon adopted back a bit. And I'd say that there's got to be a dozen or more communities lining up right now. One of the ones that's always been a leader in this area, as I mentioned before, the town of Bedford, they are updating their custom energy code to the New York stretch as we speak. So we're also working with some of the larger municipalities, Kingston, New Rochelle, White Plains, and hopefully Yonkers eventually. So a lot of community interest. Lots of resources for you to take advantage of. We have developed, or I should say, NYSERDA has developed template legislation, resolution or legislation form to help you, to help make it easier for you to adopt the New York stretch code, however you do it in your municipality, and can offer additional help on that front as well. There is going to be a single volume code manual so that the New York stretch requirements are overlaying the basic New York Energy Code requirements so that you can take a look at one book. Your code officials can refer to one book for all and both what they have to do in the base code and what they would add to that by adding the New York stretch code. Lots of training upcoming for the code officials and all the construction stakeholders. There is updated freeware software. This ResCheck and ComCheck tools are something that your code officials have used in the past and are familiar across the state, have been used in New York State for as long as they've adopted the national model code. There's a frequently asked questions document. And then there's us, the outreach coordinators. Actually, we are considered circuit riders doing technical assistance and providing strategies and guidance for meetings and actually showing up at meetings with presentations or to answer questions. So for example, if you had a public meeting around this possible adoption, we would be happy to attend talk to your builders and your designers that you work with, and anybody who's involved in the construction process. There's being set up right now a hotline for technical and interpretation assistance for the energy code and the New York stretch. And all of this can be found here on this website, NYSERDA's Stretch Energy 2020 site. In Beacon, the way things went down is we had great support from the mayor and the village manager there. Beacon went to the public meeting one night after I had talked with the code official, and we had given one short presentation and adopted this back at the beginning of the COVID time in about 3 weeks, going through the implementation stages now. Likewise, Hastings on Hudson, Nikki Armacost was very much an advocate for this, as well as much of her board and her sustainability committee. And you see a quote from her here. They adopted it fairly quickly as well, as did Dobbs Ferry, where they've been a leader in that in the Hudson Valley as well. So a lot of activity going on, but these are the three municipalities that adopted it this year so far. It's also important to know that, you know, again, this code is not rocket science. It's state of the shelf. And many housing projects are already taking advantage of recognition programs, incentive programs, design incentive programs, what have you. One example is this mixed use project, commercial and residential in Hudson. Galvan Initiatives built that project. This project complies with the New York stretch code and used a number of higher efficiency options in its design, and did a really great job of it. You know, in a cost point that was in the affordable housing range, by primarily involving adaptive reuse of an existing building. Upstate, in another community considering adoption, a real estate developer there in Canandaigua up in the Finger Lakes built this apartment dwelling complex, 3 plexes, 4 plexes, 8 plexes. They actually got to full net zero energy above and beyond the New York stretch, but also was compliant with the New York stretch. They did so by adding photovoltaic and a ground source heat pump system, much like Boniello construction is doing in your area currently. And also took advantage of incentives for design and for the technologies from to super insulate these buildings. So another great investment. Anyway, that's that for the moment. If you'd like, we can go back. We can talk about anything you want to tonight. But here's the key contact, folks. Of course, Marilyn Dare and myself. Marilyn said to apologize that she had a conflict tonight. And of course, your key player here on the clean energy community side is Anila. She can guide you through all of that clean energy community work as you get to it. The documents are here. Larry, you have the presentation that you could share with everybody so they have that information. And I offer to talk with any or all of you again if you want to set up a meeting with any of your construction stakeholders, or if you'd like me to speak with your code official to make sure he's up to speed on what's going on here, his support is fairly key. And as most of those in the other communities that are involved, they have been supportive. And so, long story short, our time is your time, and I don't want to take any more of your time than you need to tonight, but I'm open for questions now if you'd like. And I'm just backing out of full view here so that we can easily get to some of the slides. You can still see it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, our building code official is well aware of the New York Stretch Energy Code. He's up to speed. His department's up to speed on it. He's kind of going on the assumption that it will be adopted here. Obviously, the board has to make that decision, but he's preparing as though it will be adopted. So he's ready for it on that end. I don't think you'll have any objections there. I think, from my standpoint, I wasn't as familiar with it. I understood it from a commercial side of things. I didn't really realize the extent to which it applies to residential new construction. We don't have a huge amount of new construction going on either front, but there are a few projects that are in the works, and it could have some application.
That's interesting, because through up and down the Hudson Valley, I'm hearing that the more recent exodus from the city because of the COVID is really got construction booming in most municipalities, and I would be willing to bet that will continue and eventually impact you more as well. But time will tell. But if there's any other need for me to speak with those folks or anybody else in the group, if you don't have any questions tonight, I'll get out of your hair so you can get down to your business at hand.
I have one question that just want to bring up, because from the context of what Larry was saying, I was hearing what he was saying, talking about new projects or new building or major reconstruction, redevelopment of reuse of existing building kind of thing. But in a residential plane, where's the cutoff where a project of a home renovation is required or would fall under these energy code guidelines versus, is there a cutoff, like a certain amount of redevelopment in the building or a certain cost level? Or
No, there isn't. It's basically guided by the New York State's statewide code. So no matter what you do around New York State, for existing buildings, when you do renovations, there's a whole renovation chapter. I actually was one of the authors of that chapter back when on an International Code Council committee. And what happens for renovations is, to put it in a nutshell, all buildings could impact or trigger the New York Energy Code. And thus, because the New York Stretch is an overlay of it, kick that into effect if you adopt it as well. And usually the general rule is there is no size or percentage or dollar amount. But generally speaking, you only have to bring up to code, at least for the energy code, those things you are changing. Now that's different for the other building codes, the residential building code and such. But for the energy code and the New York Stretch, for example, if you're adding insulation to a home, there's a minimum insulation level you got to hit. And usually that cost increment is pretty tiny to go from what you got to do for the New York base code to the New York Stretch code. Or, for example, if you're putting in a new furnace, well, the incentive to go to a higher efficiency furnace is there and could easily meet whatever the New York Energy Code and the New York Stretch Code require. Plus, you've got Con Ed incentives to pay for that. So it's pretty minimal on residential. A new addition to an existing home would have to meet the full energy code, just like it's a new home. But that, again, is the same for the existing New York Energy Code. So there's no different rules that way for the New York Stretch Code. It's all the same as what you're enforcing now.
Okay, thank you.
Did I answer that okay without sucking all the air out of the room? Okay, any other questions? Well, so you have this and you have my contact information. As I said, I'll get out of your hair and you folks be well. Make sure you get your shovels out and the snow blower running and be well.
Mike,
Thanks very
thank
much.
you.
I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll
Yeah,
be in
thank
touch
you.
soon.
Yeah,
Ditto that, Mike. What Mike said, thank you so much for having us be able to present today. And Larry, if in case to take up Mike on his offer, there's also the issue of CPACE financing that the town of Greenberg has signed. And that might be something that might be useful for commercial entities that are looking for financing for clean energy. So
Yep.
with that said, I wish you all a healthy and happy rest of the board meeting. Feel free to reach out anytime. And I'm here.
I
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noah.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays, guys.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Well, next up, we actually have another presentation, but I think we're calling it an update from the farmers market. And I believe Melinda's here, Larry?
Yep. And Sandy, hold on.
Sandy as well?
Yep.
I see Melinda.
Hi, everyone.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good.
I
So
know there's Sandy.
Hello. Sorry about that.
there we go.
Hey, Sandy.
Well, thank you both for joining us. And I know you have some good things to say about the farmers market and how it's operating. So the board is looking forward to an update.
Well, thank you. I just want to say thanks for inviting us. It's nice to put faces with names, and hopefully it's nice for you not to just have me be a faceless name on the other side of the emails. And also just thank you for your support, especially Larry and Brenda, who's not on tonight, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. And for everyone who supports the market. I guess I could start by saying that despite COVID, I think if you were to measure the success of the market on attendance and community support, it's never been better. In the summer, when things were moved back to Main Street, they were recording numbers up 900,000, over 1,000 people. And lots of people were maybe coming up from the city and enjoying it as an outing. But certainly the community has continued to appreciate it as one of the things that just remains a sense of normalcy, a place for you to run into your neighbors. So feedback is amazing and positive. And then also importantly, the success of the market's also fed by how happy the vendors are to come and sell in Irvington and how supported they feel, both by loyalty and financially. And again, we're hearing just amazing things from Pascal that the vendors are now saying Irvington is their favorite market. I overheard, the vendors don't all know who I am. Sometimes I'll take the time to introduce myself, but mostly I go as a shopper. And someone said, oh, you must be a little cold. And they said, oh, we can't complain. The loyalty here is amazing. So I think everyone is really happy, and Pascal keeps it running amazingly and continues to find interesting vendors. And I don't know if anyone had a chance to go on Sunday. That was our opening market, and the line was around the corner. We had essentially pop-up vendors that won't be back necessarily next weekend, selling more craft type things, and they were local people. Susie was there, former chair of the committee, and it was fantastic. It was a really festive atmosphere. And we have a great committee. I'm so grateful Sandy's here tonight and doing a great job just really tracking the finances and trying to understand what the year is going to look like, so that we can have, additionally, we do sometimes have surplus, and there's a healthy savings there for us to do programming when things get back on track, as far as what we can do is interacting with people at the market. So I have turn it over to Sandy so she could maybe give you a little bit of an update on how the market's doing financially. Oh, we can't hear you, Sandy.
You look at that. Sorry about that. Hello. So as Melinda said, I help her out on the committee and look over our numbers and just make sure things are running smoothly from a financial point of view. Work with Pascal and Rose on her staff to see the vendor rents, et cetera, and just, make sure everything is running smoothly from that end, and, checking in with Brenda and her team. As Melinda said, the market operates now, it runs a surplus basically every year, a small surplus. And I would say last year, prior to COVID, we had anticipated that the market would have net $3,000 to $5,000, all in, because, we stopped the market and it, ceased operations. In the spring, there was still a small surplus of 1K. We sit down as a committee and kind of budget conservatively with a low estimation of vendors that has come in higher, and also kind of assume things like a weather-related cancel and basically target a sponsorship dollar to cover the market, so the base market costs, if it's not covered by vendor rents. Really, it's a very straightforward operation. I mean, there are some extra costs, like music is something that we're not doing currently, but post-COVID, we'll go back to it, and that will be funded by sponsorship dollars as well. Really, the biggest expenses are our relationship with Pascal, who really just manages things so seamlessly. And also, when there's an indoor market, the janitorial expense at MSS. So that's really a typical year. This year, we are projecting a small deficit, maybe around 3,000. And that just is under the assumption that we have a couple of cancellations with the winter market being outdoors and a relatively low number of vendors. It's quite possible that we do better than that. We just wanted to have a sense of, what the possible downside could be. The good news is that our sponsorship committee member did just secure $2,000 in sponsorship to help offset some of the additional expense this year, which is great news. That's a quick finance snapshot. I don't know if there are any questions.
So before, I'm sure there are questions, but I had just one thing to say, and I want you to know that I know Melinda and Sandy, I'm sure, worked very hard to kind of tighten up the agreement with Pascal. And the way I would say it is that the market is mature now. It obviously started as an infant and worked its way up, and it's a mature market, and both sides wanted to make a firm commitment to each other. And the agreement that's being developed and will probably evolve even a little bit more kind of reflects that commitment on both sides. So it's a little like, taking your short-term lease and converting it into a long-term lease a little bit. I mean, there's, of course, there's always out clauses, but there's a good commitment on both sides. And I think that really will strengthen the market going forward. A lot of stability there. Pascal doesn't have to worry about the rug being pulled out from under her, and we don't have to worry about, her up and leaving out of nowhere. You know what I mean? And I mean, not that we're locked in 100% tight, but it's as much more of a commitment than we had before. And that was really a good job done by all. So I appreciate that.
Well, I just wanted to take a moment to compliment and thank Melinda and Sandy and their team for picking up, as Susie left, and making sure that things ran smoothly, for not being flustered, this past year, for just constantly working on how to get it to happen, how to have it continue. And I really think the culmination was this past Sunday when after an absence of a couple of weeks, the first winter market, I actually drove twice up Main Street and turned around and went home and turned around and came back again before we could find a spot to wait online to get in. I mean, maybe we should have more frequent winter markets. Let's see. But again, seriously, just, I know how hard you guys work. I know, we've been in contact sometimes on Sunday mornings and, just to get information through. And I think, we're in good hands here.
Well, I don't know you guys as much. My husband is the shopper in the family, and he did go and stood in line, and that was great this week. But I guess Brian and I and Larry, of course, or Larry Shopper, remember 2009 when this all started. So it's as described as mature now is apropos. It's good to have a mature person who's come around through all the teenage years and the toddler years. And I'm so thrilled. I'm thrilled that Larry Lonke, you've taken the reins here too. So, kudos to everybody. And I think we can have another at least 10 or 20 years going forward.
Well, great. I have to say, I really value it. It was certainly something that I factored in when we looked at where we wanted to live around the river towns. It really is, to me, a bit of a jewel here. It says something about a community that it can sustain a market like that. So I really feel committed to making sure it's here for a long time.
Yeah, and speaking of the importance of markets, if we think back to the early days of the pandemic, the governor actually declared farmers markets as essential. So I think that, to me, it was kind of an interesting point back then that, we were like, oh, how are we going to have the market? And we were trying to figure out how to spread things out. And, I think it just kind of took care of itself. And it has been, one of the few places that you can still go that feels a little bit like a community, even if it's not exactly the same and there's no music and you have to control the kind of amount of people in there. You still kind of get that sense of community. You can at least wave to someone and, you're behind a mask, but, it feels a little bit normal. So it's been great. I usually go a little later. I go around noon. So I missed that big rush, but some things are sold out, but it's okay. I get my pickles anyway. But thank you so much for all the work that you guys have put in it. And the transition from Susie to you guys has been seamless on our end anyway. I'm sure on your end, it was, like ducks with their feet under the water, keeping everything going while everything looked calm on the surface. But we're super happy to have the market, and we're happy that it's thriving. And to hear that feedback from the vendors is great, because I think that's always my biggest concern is, you have vendors that aren't happy, it kind of taints the whole thing. So it's great that we have kind of that continuity and everyone seems excited about it. So thank you very much.
Any other questions or? Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been great working with you both.
Happy holidays. And I'll see you on the hill, Melinda.
Yes.
Not tonight, though.
No. Okay. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Let's see here. Okay.
All right. Next up, we have review of proposed North Broadway zoning. And Larry, we're going to invite the members of the Housing Committee right from the beginning, or
Yeah, let's do that. And just give me a second here to, we'll get it in order here. And, okay. So those are the three that I see. If there's someone else, they may not have their name, exactly accurate. So I'll let Deb and the other members tell me if there's someone else I should look for.
There's only one other, which is Sue Robinson.
Right. So unless she raises her hand, I don't see any Sue in the audience. So, okay. All right. I think we have here. Okay. Deb, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm
Hello there.
struggling with my Zoom here, which I thought I was safely into.
Oh, we
Right.
can hear you, Deb. We just can't see you.
Okay, well, maybe you'll see me in a few
I mean,
minutes.
Can you turn your camera on or not really?
I thought I did. I don't know. Okay, well, let's see.
We've learned that if
Probably I hear I have a helper coming.
we've learned that if you were on a Microsoft Teams meeting prior to this, it hijacks your camera, and even though it looks like it's on, it's not on. So
Okay, wait. Oh,
Yeah,
there
there
I
we
am
go.
with the helper.
just operating error. Okay.
Okay.
So
Thank goodness.
yeah.
We're children. We're not really children anymore.
Thank you for joining us. And one quick thing, just a bit of housekeeping. So Karen, you sent me an email asking that everyone is displayed on your screen, and I don't actually control what gets displayed on your screen. There's two different views that you can choose from. You can either do a gallery view or you can do the speaker view where you only see one person. So
Right.
So it's not something I choose. So I know you sent me an email. I just wanted to make sure you didn't think I could do something about that if it's not working right, because I can't.
Thank you. I'm on now, so I can see everybody
Oh, good. Okay.
who's
Good.
on. Thank you.
Okay.
You poor thing.
Okay. All
This
right.
is snow isn't coming down on our heads, right?
Yeah, this is novel, having a meeting on a snowy night.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a lot to discuss, and obviously, the Housing Committee was kind enough to provide some feedback, some initial feedback last month, and then some follow-up feedback as late as this afternoon, actually, from a meeting that you had. So maybe it would be helpful if you summarize the content of your discussions that you had with Rose Noonan, and we can start thinking about some of those things, and the board can also think about some of the other feedback they've heard, over this last month or so.
Okay, I can just read from the email that I sent earlier, which is kind of bullet pointed and I think is fairly straightforward.
Mhm.
So basically, three of us met last night with Rose Noonan, who's the executive director of the Housing Action Council, and she's been a sort of ad hoc member of our committee since its inception, I believe. And she's extremely knowledgeable about all things affordable housing in Westchester County. Her agency vets potential renters and buyers of affordable housing in the county. She works with developers. She's intimately familiar with all of the different projects. So she's a wonderful resource. So anyway, I had sent her a copy of the most recent proposed zoning, and she took a look at it and we had a discussion. And so here is what we kind of took away from conversation with her. No other municipalities that she's aware of are offering density bonuses for 120 to 150% of AMI units. That's, usually they're all below 100% of AMI if they're offering any sort of density bonus. The ones that do offer density bonuses make a distinction between for sale housing and rental housing. So it's different income levels. The needs are apparently quite different. So for rental housing at 150% of AMI, there really isn't much of a need, but for sale housing, there's quite a bit. So most municipalities offering bonuses do force the do so for rental units up to 80% AMI, for sale units up to 100%, but sometimes 120%, something higher. Okay, so the income level for a two-person household at 150% AMI. And AMI, for those of you who don't know, is area median income, which is a number determined by HUD. And in Westchester County, that is, it depends on the number of people in the household. So,
Like 120 something thousand.
well, for a four-person household,
Yeah.
it's 125,800. So it's not an insignificant number. This is 100%, not 150. For one person, so for a single person, it's 88,100. But in any event, so for a two-person household at 150% AMI, it's annual income of $151,000. With that income level, the guideline is basically that they can spend 33% of their gross income on rent. So that would suggest a monthly rental of $4,100 a month, which is pretty close, if not at market rate, really. And one of the things Rose did was today she went and she took a look at some of the newer apartment buildings that have been built in this area with affordable housing components, but which are primarily rental, which are primarily market rate. And I have some numbers on those too, but you'll see there, some of them are lower than $4,100 a month for a two-bedroom. So at 120% of area median income, two people could earn as much as $120,800. So a couple could be earning $120,800, and the allowable rent would be about $3,300. So according to the 2019 housing needs assessment that the county published, the median household income of an Irvington renter is $46,000. The median monthly rent is $1,600 a month, and the vacancy rate is 0. So offering developers density bonuses for creating apartments between $3,300 a month and $4,100 a month doesn't really seem to make much sense, to us at least. County funds, when they're available to developers to add some extra affordable units, are generally only available for infrastructure and building costs when the rental units will be affordable to households earning up to 60% of the area median income. So that's 60% of for one person, of 88,100. I haven't calculated that, but obviously you can do that pretty easily. Or for sale units that are affordable to households earning up to 80% of AMI. Some other incentives that she is familiar with being offered by municipalities are tax abatements, fee reductions. So, all of the various building fees that builders have to pay, they can reduce or eliminate those, and a promise of expedited approval processes. She said Bedford in particular offers that, but it's kind of vague. They don't really put a number or a timeline on it. They just say it will be expedited. And let's see. And basically incentives that are offered by municipalities are offered to for-profit developers who are building primarily a market rate project, but for whom the municipality, or from whom the municipality is trying to encourage the addition of affordable housing units above and beyond what is mandated by the zoning code. So similar to what we're doing here. And that's basically what I wrote to my housing committee members and what we learned from Rose last night and the trustees today. Just for an example, what Rose got me today was market rents for, as I said, some recently built rental properties. And so the Danforth in Dobbs Ferry, which is over in Rivertown Square, I think it's called, right on the Sawmill. Their two-bedroom units go from $3,750 to $4,400 for market rate, no subsidies. In Pleasantville, there's a property called 39 Washington Lofts. That's very nice and sort of downtown Pleasantville. Their 2 bedrooms are $4,200 a month. Chappaqua Crossing, which is a very interesting development for more reasons than I had realized before, but their market rate 2 bedrooms go for $2,900. So that's on the lower side. And then in Hastings, the Sawmill River Lofts, which was built by Ginsberg on that bike trail on the other side of the Sawmill River, their 2 bedrooms go from $4,000 to $5,000 a month. Yeah, they've got a variety. So, and the only other, the other thing of interest that I discovered is Chappaqua Crossing. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. It's the old Reader's Digest property in Chappaqua. So it's part of a much bigger development, which is supposed to be getting some for sale townhouses. I don't think those have been built yet. There's also a commercial component. So it's a big mixed use development. But the old Reader's Digest building itself, which is beautiful, was developed into 64, I believe it was 64 units of rental housing, of which, wait a minute, let me look. Units are affordable.
Sorry, we couldn't hear you, Deb.
I'm sorry, 28 units are affordable. 10 units are workforce, and 26 units are market rate. So the 28 units of affordable are affordable to people at or below 50%. This is confusing. 50 to 60% of AMI. Let's just leave it at that. The workforce housing, and there's not too many complexes that have workforce housing specifically, but they do. And their workforce housing is for people earning at or below 90% of AMI.
Now, the county provided money for that project, if I remember correctly. And I imagine they also had other levels of subsidy, although I'm not sure if they had anything from the state level.
Right. So Tom, was that developed by the developer that you spoke with?
Wilder Bolter, the Reader's Digest. Yeah.
They're an affordable housing developer, aren't they? Is that primarily what they do?
They do the full range.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Bill Balter and spoke to him about a number of projects that he's involved in, including the project in Terrytown at the side of the the current YMCA, which is being sold and turned into over 100 units of affordable. Yeah.
Great. So yeah, they think there was multiple levels of financing for that project.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the thing that we've all been working on, for many months, as you know, is, how to come up with a balance between, something that's affordable and something that is high-end market rate, which is, strong likelihood to be built in this area of the county. And how do you make that mix be more favorable to what you're looking for in your community? Have it be available to income levels, lower income levels, 50%, 60%, whatever the number is. And so the balancing act that the board was trying to, the tightrope that they were trying to walk was, we know they have to provide the minimum number of affordables.
Right.
We wanted to offer additional density bonuses, and I think they have to also talk a little bit about coverage and floor area bonuses potentially for that as well. But how do you then go even beyond that and provide something what we thought was more in the middle? But I think you made the point, and rightly so, that the 150% is probably is too high. But that's for the board to discuss. But how do you how do you make it go the way you want? You can say that this property, we'd like to see it developed 100% affordable, or 50% affordable and 50% workforce, but without subsidies, that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's simply not going to happen. There's no profit motive there for any for-profit developer. Now you might get might get lucky and have an affordable developer come along who has access to those subsidies, but we don't control those properties, and
Right.
so that's the challenge that they're faced with. So how do you create the balance that we're looking for and see a project go in a direction that you'd like, with skewed more to the affordable and less away from the market rate? And that's what
So
we figure out.
can I jump in here for 1 second? Because I've spoken now to 2 people regarding exactly that. And they've both said the same thing. And one of them is Sadie McCune, who lives in Terrytown, is on the housing committee there and is an affordable housing, professional and very, very well versed. And the other is Bill Balter, who's one of the partners in that firm that's developed a lot of affordable housing. And they both said that the first thing is that the leadership of a municipality has to have political will and has kind of state the desire to actually create affordable units. If the political will is there, it doesn't necessarily mean that it can be done, but it means that there's actually a chance of it being done. And then in the case of, there are 3 properties, Bill Balter said that if, for example, we as a municipality decide that we wanted to develop a 60-unit affordable housing complex, one of the owners of the property would need to be able to, as Bill Balter put it, sit still. In other words, wait until the process, works its way through, which is typically a year or 2. And through garnering tax credits and various different revenue sources from local, state, and federal governments, then it actually can happen and has happened in a number of communities. And I think that the article that Larry Lonke sent out to us, and I don't know if he sent it out to members of the board, but it was about a community in Wisconsin that a number of years ago, there was a lot of opposition to this affordable housing complex that was intended to be built, and eventually it was built. The opposition was overcome, and certainly there would be a lot of opposition in this town. And many, many of the people who were opposed a number of years ago now say that they were wrong to be opposed. And the article points out that what's really important about affordable housing is that affordable housing not be concentrated in places like Peekskill or in Yonkers or in the kind of typically lower income communities, but that it'd be spread out throughout a county or communities throughout a state, so that you don't have the problem that you have had with public housing complexes and things like that, where there's a concentration of poverty in one particular area, and then as a result of that area deteriorates, property values go down, all of that. So that's kind of where we're at. And I would just suggest that the board might, I know this process is playing out and it's going to play out over presumably a period of time beyond tonight and beyond the next board meeting, but I would suggest that you might want to invite 1 or 2 of these affordable housing developers or experts to, talk about what the possibilities actually might be, and to think whether or not there's any appeal of developing something like this. So, yeah.
So Tom, when you speak of the political will to get this done, is that a statement by the board? I mean, it's not part of the zoning law that we're
no,
that's requiring something.
No, not at all. No. I mean, the zoning law would be the zoning law. I mean, and as Brian noted at some meeting before, certainly once this zoning law goes through, it doesn't preclude anything other than the things that aren't allowed by the zoning. So what I'm suggesting to the board is that if there was an appetite for kind of learning more, in depth about this and seeing, wow, maybe it would actually be possible on one of the larger properties to get a developer in there who will come in and develop a tasteful, affordable housing complex, and that we could put together money from a number of different sources and with tax credits. And Bill Balter says it's absolutely doable if the community would want to do it.
Tom, can I just say something about that? Like, and the example you gave is the Y in Terrytown. My experience has been where there's been new affordable housing created, it's because the municipality gets a piece of property, or maybe, and if the village, got some property from foreclosures or something like that, or if it gets like an abandoned, right. Essentially the Y was, I'm sure they did, got it at a decent price.
Well, it was actually quite expensive, but you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I know. See that? So it isn't so much only the will. Of course, you've got to have the will. And my experience with this board is they've got the will, but right. You also need to get the piece of property. And I think at least on these North Broadway properties, the village has absolutely no control over ownership, no in as to ownership of any of them. And I think
Oh yeah, no, I totally understand that, and it is the case that with Terrytown, that some of the funding for that affordable housing complex there is being provided by the building that is down by the Walgreens, which is owned by a nonprofit, and so some of the money for the development of that is coming from that. So you're absolutely correct. But in terms of purchasing property, yes, you need to find some source for that, right? But that source can be government subsidies.
Yeah.
I just want to follow up on also, Tom, with what you said about political will. That I think for me, and I reacted kind of to what Larry and Marianne both said, we're here because we have the political will. We want to make this happen. That is our stated purpose. What we are trying to do and getting input from your committee and a bunch of other people is how can we best go about this? And it's lots of pieces, lots of moving parts, lots of challenges. But I think we're that threshold where you don't need to sell us.
Okay. Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to suggest that it wasn't there. All I was saying is what he said, which is political will is necessary but not sufficient, right? I mean,
that's where we are.
What? Yeah, I mean, that's I guess where where we are. But in terms of, I think for me, what was a little bit off-putting was this density bonus, targeted at 120 to 150% of median income, just because what that suggested to me is that, wow, if that's going to be like the moderate units, these are going to be really, really expensive housing units that are going to be developed on these properties. If we're talking about giving density bonuses for people who are, making up to $180,000 a year. To afford, yeah.
Just on that point, Tom, because I think after the last discussion, I think the board, if we're so 150, I think there was sort of general agreement that maybe 150 is too high and they should be at least consider it at 120. I would be really interested in what your views are of if the moderate income was capped at 120, 120% of AMI.
I mean, myself, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the committee, and I'm going to shut up so other people can speak. But I would say that there's no real reason to give density bonuses unless you're going to create more affordable units. I mean, what's the purpose of doing that? You're essentially so that you're getting people that are making a little bit less money than, the people who can afford the market rate. I mean, that doesn't really create the kind of diversity that I think we're seeking to create through this.
Yeah, I
So-
mean, if I can interject here, at 120% for rental units, again, the rent, depending on the number of people in a household, could range from $2,900 a month to $4,150 a month, which is really not moderate and not that far off the rents that are being charged market rate in nearby complexes. So I think if we're talking rental, I think, maybe looking at the Chappaqua Crossing model of 90% is something that would really add value. I don't think at 120% it really warrants giving terribly much away. However, if it happens to be for sale housing, then that's a completely different story. And
Yeah, well,
there's not much.
Deb, I just wanted to say, I want to thank you guys, because something I hadn't really considered was that while we can't, determine what's going to be built there, if it's rental or for sale, homes, we can give different kinds of incentives for different kinds of building. And that, I think is something that, is worth considering.
Yes.
I think so too. Because it's very difficult at that income level to buy in, especially to a community like Irvington.
Right, and that's where perhaps that number could be a little higher. As you guys have stated, even at 150, they're still well below
big need.
affordable numbers, right? There's still a big gap there.
Yeah, I mean, at 150% of AMI, the maximum sale price that can be afforded would be between $400,000 for a one-person household to $736,000 for a four-person. So that's not too far. I mean, I think you can find something in the county for $736,000. At 120% though of county median income, it goes from $248,000 for a one-person household to $521,000. So, you'd be hard pressed, and that has to include, let's see, it includes common charges, real estate taxes, insurance, as well as mortgage interest. So there's a lot of things rolling into that. But I think that would definitely make sense to have different income levels for the different types of housing.
I mean, the base case that we were working with is that if you require 10% of the development to be affordable, which is what's in our code, that the base that you're working with is that the other 90% is going to be market rate. Okay, so that's
right.
That's an obvious statement, I think. So the board felt that, by trying to hit some of the numbers in the middle, and we can debate what's in the middle, of course, and what's appropriate, but by trying to incentivize something in the middle, that you would get something other than 90% at market rate. You get some lower number at market rate and some number in the middle, and then some number of affordables. So, how to go about that has been the challenge and the source of this discussion and debate, and what's the best way to do it and which areas to address. If the lower the income number that you're addressing, the more of a need for outside subsidy that has to occur. Or alternatively, the more you have to provide in allowable market rate units to be built. So if you're not going to rely on outside subsidies, then the only way to finance the in the middle units, I don't know if they're called moderate, the ones in the middle and the affordables, the only way to finance those is by selling more market rates.
Right, although they are somewhat tied to what the market rate is.
Right,
these are probably not going to have river views and such. So there will be some upper limits on what could be charged, which could, yeah, we don't want to put it in such a position where there's simply no interest in the property. because
Well, or that
Or interest in the incentive.
yeah, there's no reason, you know.
It's got to be an incentive.
Right.
remember-
So Rose did point out that there are municipalities with density bonuses that are not being used. That they exist, but they're not really being taken advantage of too much.
Sure.
That's right.
So,
Because they're not making money. The developer's not making money off it, so he may as well, or she may as well build all market.
and
there is
again,
a-
the need for rental housing in Irvington is so great.
And that's how we kind of came at this. And unless, I don't know whether you probably weren't looking at these numbers, but if you did have any information, if Bill Balter had it, would be helpful. But our understanding was that a developer pretty much breaks even at 100, and we have the figures to show breaks even at an apartment marketed at 120%. He breaks even, or she breaks even. So if for each of those, they could get an additional market rate, that's an incentive. The incentive isn't to build a 120% one. Why should they when they could get one at market? But if you get them to build that, the way you get to build that is by letting them have one more market unit. And once you go lower than that, and I think this is what Larry was getting at, it would have to be an awful big incentive to make them do it. You know,
Right,
you've got to create the incentive. And what the board's thinking was that at 120%, because of the break even, there probably is an incentive. And at 100, and I understand they're probably not going to go with the 150, but at a 150, there would be, that would be an incentive, but they'd get less of a bonus for that. So that's why it was like a reduced bonus at 150%. So that if you had numbers that worked otherwise, that would be helpful. But those are the numbers they got, and we're kind of basing it on that from a developer who has a lot of experience in affordable.
Right.
We actually was the initial developer on worked for Ginsburg on the project in Hastings, which I was the attorney on it. I mean, the attorney for Hastings.
no?
I know about that one inside out.
Right.
The problem is that, the other side of this discussion is that if you're relying on more and more incentives to try to get more and more of what you want, say affordable and, 90% units, 100% units, whatever they are, the board's also been struggling with the size of the build out size of these properties. I mean, you probably heard it yourself at these meetings, they're balancing that out as well in terms of that these are
not only the build out size, Larry, the number of units, the number of additional units that might be permitted.
Right. So while it would be nice to say, well, okay, let's get another 10 affordables and give another 15 market rates, at some point you're building on so being exceeded, and then we've got other issues to deal with in terms of passing that legislation. So the whole thing is just one big balancing act, as you know. And I'm not justifying, I'm just telling you where we're at and
I know.
why we're struggling.
I mean, I did notice that looking through the list of affordable units that are being marketed on the county's website, there's quite a few where there's 1 or 2 units, in a much bigger building. I mean, there's some where I could not tell how big the overall project was. There were some that looked to be 100% affordable, but there were others where clearly it was just a very small number, and maybe it was just numbers that were mandated, like the clear 10%, of the.
Those are the 10% numbers. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure that's what that is, because the only way a development becomes entirely affordable is if it's subsidized, whether it's level or whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
And to the point that Tom was talking about before, yeah, if a developer has, a couple of years to get the process, to get applications approved on a state level, that can work. We did it for the Burnham building, but we own the Burnham building,
Right.
We waited around for a couple of years. If a lot of people were wondering what was going on between 1994 and 1997 when something actually happened. Well, that's what was happening.
Right.
Right.
But that's very different. How do we get to that point? I don't know. I mean, that's the challenge with any of these properties.
I wanted to swing back to when you were talking about the cost of ownership of homes being purchased that are, I guess we call it quote, moderate. So you were saying that, or I guess it was Deb or somebody, that $521,000 would be the cost of a house that included utilities and other things and taxes. Now that's certainly on the lower side for houses, single family homes in Irvington. But can we, what would be the role in our legislation or in our incentives to encourage ownership rather than rentals? I mean, I'm just playing
don't
with the
think-
idea.
That's
You
really
can't-
up to the developer,
Yeah,
but you
but I
can
thought you
give
do
a
it.
higher level, say, give a density bonus for building for sale units that were affordable to people earning 120 to 150% AMI, because those people do have a very hard time finding for sale units that they can afford.
Well, I didn't think single, I mean, I know this is multifamily, but in terms of the type of ownership that it be, if it were, yeah, so I think I get your point that
Right.
you can't, it's not up to us to determine what, in
No,
what way.
and something that crossed my mind, which isn't clear, is, sometimes developers will be building for sale housing, but during the course of construction, the economy goes south, whatever, and then they decide to rent instead of sell because there really isn't a market. And so if you've given a density bonus, for the 120, I guess they would just have to rent them for less money. They would have to rent according to the rental guidelines as opposed to the for sale.
Okay.
So ideally, let me just, I'm not going to try to put words in your mouth. So ideally, we know the 10% affordable is required. The housing committee would like to see workforce housing, if it's not going to be additional affordable. So let's assume there's no subsidies out there that are being utilized. You would be happy to see workforce housing developed addressing somewhere around 90% of median income. I'm not saying how much of the development would be devoted to that. Maybe it's another 10%. I don't know. I mean, the board has to talk about that and figure it out.
So you mean providing incentives for them to build units
Right.
for people at 90% of AMI for rentals? I mean, we haven't really discussed that. We haven't discussed coming up with an overall
Actual
question
target.
on that question, but I would be comfortable with that.
Let's just make up a number for discussion, right? So let's say that was the case. That was something that the housing committee would be supportive of and the rest of the board would be supportive of. If that were to be the case, then the board's going to have to be prepared to develop a larger incentive that also includes additional bulk and mass on these sites in order to accomplish that. You know what I mean? Otherwise, those workforce units are not going to get built. You know what I mean? And so, and if that's the relationship that we're shooting for, and maybe we just have to have something to shoot for here, but if that's the relationship we're shooting for, the board's going to have to be prepared to deal with some additional bulk for these properties to allow that to happen, because you can't have workforce units built and not have a developer given an opportunity to make a profit to make up for those units that they're building that they're not getting the money for.
I just want to say, I feel like you're
Right.
jumping ahead because none of us have discussed workforce units before tonight.
Not
So I don't
understood.
even know if we agree that that's the direction we should be going on it.
I wasn't trying to do that. I was
I
trying.
think moderate is workforce. I mean, I think they're kind of interchangeable.
Well,
Well,
no,
no, because
I mean, no,
workforce
that was
is-
not the intention here, because workforce is really different. Workforce is generally at 90%, maybe 100%. The board was not talking about it in that formal sense. They were just talking about like affordable with a small a, affordable that, Connie wants to move out of her house and move into an apartment. You may have all the money in the world. I don't know. But
Haven't checked.
so people can stay in Irvington or, so I always say affordable with a small a, So what
And too, that
workforce is different, Deb. When they're talking about workforce, you're usually talking about aimed at, and often with workforce housing, for instance, in Hastings, the workforce housing can go, there's a priority, like it would go to people who teach in Irvington, teach in Hastings, work in Hastings.
Can't do that anymore, can you?
anymore.
Yes, you could do that with your workforce because they were above their 10%. They still had to have the 10%, but you could.
Oh,
So
I see.
that often happens with workforce. I think that's the case in Ardsley as well.
And remember, the trade-off with density includes continued conversation about school enrollment and traffic, right? So if we're trading off more density, more dense building in order to accomplish this, that's yet another factor we have to balance.
Right.
And
And Rose said, and it's totally true, affordability and density go hand in hand.
Yes.
The denser anything is, the more affordable it can become, which is why single family housing on 1 acre lots is not anywhere near.
Right, it's not.
To exchange.
It's not.
And where can I ask how much or does the board feel like there's, significant pushback beyond, for example, the letter that was received by mostly neighbors on Strawberry Lane with what I considered to be a kind of a bizarre proposal for people to build accessory dwelling units on their property as a solution to this problem. But is there tremendous, kind of pressure from the community not to carry out this rezoning, or is it mostly concentrated in, some of the families who neighbor these properties?
I think the general conversation I've heard and picked up on, the biggest concern that I've heard is the potential traffic impacts, because North Broadway is already such a mess that, that's the first thing I hear in almost any conversation, about it, not all the other stuff about the accessory housing or whatever came out of that other discussion from Strawberry Lane, but definitely the impact of the density versus traffic.
Yeah, I think that's probably number one. Number two is impact on schools, and number three is probably impacts on other costs, which I think are probably overstated. Somehow we subsidize people that don't pay full freight on everything from schooling to, like the fact that they could be condos, and then condos are taxed at a lower rate than housing and things like that. So those seem to be the other. I think explaining to people that we're talking about people making $125,000 a year and not zero income and on full assistance. I think that message has gotten out to 95% of the people. So it's not, skyscraper Section 8 housing we're talking about. So I think that's good. So we're starting from a very strong base there. And then I think it's just, how dense is it going to be? And I think a lot of I think you get around a lot of those objections by having such a big setback that we still do. Obviously, if we didn't have such a big setback, you could fit a lot more building there. But that we've determined that that's another important, another important factor that potentially is working against us is we want to have as much open space while having as much density. They obviously are completely diametrically opposed to each other. But that's what we've been trying to do. So it's kind of setting a depth where you have open space, and then kind of creating deep, how much depth can we create behind that open space that is acceptable to people for the reasons, traffic and costs and those types of things.
Right, that's,
Again, and we are addressing that. I'm sorry, Connie, go ahead.
oh, that was the thing that, before you brought it up, Brian, that was the other consideration. It's not that I hear people talk about it so much, but that acceptance that the look of that open space in that part of the village would be maintained, that the stone walls and the setback and all that would keep that appearance, and that we would then be able to somehow manage to do all the other things that we're trying to do. So yeah, that's one more constraining factor to make it possible, impossible, maybe possible. Anyway.
And I do think that the fact that we've limited it to just the properties on Broadway has made the conversation a lot easier, because you don't have anything else. You have one property that enters on Strawberry Lane. The other two don't touch Strawberry Lane. Abbott House obviously was much bigger. It's as big as almost all the other properties combined. If you add the Holy Spirit property in there, then you have, twice as big as everything else combined, or more. So I think in my opinion anyway, limiting those two large properties that weren't really contiguous to Broadway anyway, we've made it a lot more palatable and I think easier to envision and discuss, because those properties being developed to me are such a wild card that I can't envision it. The smaller properties on Broadway that are still large, I think we can, envision them, especially since we had so much time looking at the Carafiello property.
So I have a question. The height restrictions, are there really strong feelings about height restrictions because of viewshed? And if it is viewshed, who's behind those properties who would be concerned? Because obviously if you're going to have a deep setback and you want to have more density and you don't want to go, melding into the side yards, the only way to go is up. But is that not a possibility?
Well, I think the problem has always been the facade height, what you see from the street, the feeling of because it's already quite a elevation between Broadway and where the 300 foot or the 250 foot zone setback is. So you're getting already at least an additional story or more in building height effectively by the ground.
Right.
Up. So that was part of the argument during the Carafiello discussion. One thing I wanted to point out was that, the code as written right now envisions that one thing to be done to as a help overall is the ability to do underground parking that doesn't count against the structure height.
Right.
One of the things no, go ahead, Deb.
I was just going to say that, a good architect could potentially create a building with more height that doesn't feel like it's looming over Broadway. But I don't know how you write that into the code. And you could obviously end up with something that was not, well done and is looming over Broadway. But it might make sense to speak to some architects about how that could be done, and if there is something that could be written into the code. I did have one other question though that Rose brought up last night, and I thought I knew the answer to it, but then when I looked more closely, I decided I wasn't sure. And that is this new part of the code that pertains to 120? What?
Deb, can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Does the new part of the code relate to the entire village of Irvington, or is it only in this district? Because the way
Deb, when you turn away, we can't hear you.
Yeah, the way it's written, yes, it would apply to the whole village.
it would apply to the whole village. Okay. Okay.
It follows the there's a article dealing with affordable housing. It follows that, and it's a separate article on moderate income housing. So if the board goes for it, this would apply in any
to the entire village then.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, because I told Rose, oh, no, this is only for the this particular zone. So I'll have to let her know that was wrong.
Right.
Larry Long,
You know,
you
I just, right, I just wanted to mention, Mark had mentioned, and agree that a major concern that we hear is about traffic on Broadway. And I don't want anyone to think that we haven't thought about that, and we are dealing with it, in the zoning. I don't want to dismiss people's concerns about that by saying, yeah, don't worry because it's part of the zoning. But the fact is, when people bring up, concerns about noise and concerns about lighting and concerns about traffic, these aren't things that we haven't thought about and haven't addressed within the zoning now.
Right.
Well, also they have to be addressed during the planning board process, literally.
Right. I mean, it's still a special permit, right?
But my concern, I mean, looking down the road, we've talked about this a bit. It's like I'm a little bit concerned about the early bird getting all the goodies. And so the first property being developed has the benefit of having the least negative impact, if we, in quotes, on traffic, because the baseline is wherever it is and they add to it. But the second property coming in now would be looking at a different higher baseline, which means that the density factors may squeeze them. So it's like, I don't know how bad it is or where the pressure comes back, but it's like, the first ones at the trough are the ones that are going to be the happiest.
Yeah, I get that point. But that brings again this discussion that's off and on about encouraging it to be senior friendly and thus probably fewer cars and less driving. And that's very attractive to me. And I just don't know, again, how do you tell a developer that's what you want? You don't.
Well, Connie, I spent a little bit of time looking through the various codes on the scene, where they have special senior housing districts, and there's, several municipalities that have them. But where they are allowed, it's at where there's special senior housing, or whether it's a floating zone or an actually physically zoned property, there's a lot higher density than we've got here. So that for instance, in Greenberg has a seniors, and somebody referred to the Greenberg zone. I looked at it, and that's 35 units an acre. So it's and then I looked at the Rye one. I got a copy of maybe it's Rybrook, and Rybrook also had a very high. So that's what you would. I mean, to be sure, the density, high density from senior housing is going to generate fewer students and less traffic. But just so you know that, I mean, I guess there's nothing to stop a developer from coming in and creating senior housing if the developer thought he or she could make money off of it. I mean, if you allow multifamily housing, it may well be that somebody says, hey, they're not allowing assisted living in Irvington, but, we can have housing marketed to seniors. But that's really more it seems to me that the developer's choice. The one thing I think of that you could do, where we're permitting a bonus, whether it's we've got right now the density bonus, but I wanted to talk to you about maybe a bonus in coverage and or FAR, is by giving, a bonus for making housing, it would have, let's say, a density bonus for building housing that's, for seniors. Mm-hmm. You could do something like that, but then you have to say, okay, so you could build that, you do that. Can you also then get the bonus for the moderate income? And then do the bonuses on top of bonuses end up with a bigger project than you find acceptable, but I think we have to talk about that.
I guess I was also mentioning the senior, following Mark's comment about the second property will have greater.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Less flexibility in terms of traffic, and might say, here's my answer.
Yeah.
Make it very attractive to seniors.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of the senior developments tend to be small.
Units are smaller.
The units are smaller. I mean, that's what they're doing in Tarrytown. So it's, I think, a 80-20 kind of situation with people over 55, 80% of the units being built are for, I guess that's considered seniors.
Right.
Yeah.
And Deb, well, I think it was Deb who sent us another set of senior ones. And was it Deb, didn't you send us an article?
Yeah, I sent you the link to the Senior Housing News
Right, Senior Housing News.
Awards.
Right, and
Yeah.
that was the one I looked on Long Island and saw the,
That
so
was huge.
they,
Oh, the what?
all community, it looked like there were a vast number of units in the development. Would be
Yeah.
an Abbott House size development, but that would maybe is it affordable? It's worth it to a developer if it's that big, but not so worth it when it's small.
Right. I
Maybe-
think
I don't know.
small, you're not going to get much in the way of affordable. That may not have had any affordable component at all. I don't know. It was just interesting because now this is a trade publication called Senior Housing News that I stumbled across, and they have annual awards in a variety of categories. And for 2020, they have 2 categories that are brand new. One was active adult, I think, and the other one was 55 plus. So these are targeted obviously towards child-free couples for the most part, or singles.
Right.
But they don't have all of the services that an assisted living or continuing care type of complex would have. They also have an award category for affordable housing for seniors. And it's, it's international actually, but I just thought it was interesting to look at the different categories for one thing, and at the different properties that have won awards and see what they look like. And I didn't have time to look at too many of them, but most of them seem to be pretty large.
Yeah, right.
All right.
It seems that there's a market now for the independent, but targeted towards senior living type project. And I think assisted living, I think it's getting overbuilt actually. I mean, and after the pandemic, I think they really have some issues. So it might be that, there's a developer out there who's interested in building a new version of senior housing.
All right, so I guess the thing is, I mean, I should ask the board this. Are you, if you really wanted to encourage senior housing, then you could have that as a permitted use that has a higher density. You permit higher density and more. That's a question. Do you want to do that?
Well, is there a way to do it also where we have more number of units, if they're going to be kind of smaller units for seniors?
Right.
So that overall,
Yeah, that's what happens if you increase the density, you get more units.
so
Right,
that's
but the FAR doesn't change, right? Necessarily.
so it's just density then, and not because just to me, there's I kind of use them almost interchangeably, which is not good, but kind of what Tom was saying, like, if you have the same footprint and you have kind of, regular housing, quote unquote, and you have, say, 60 units, could you somehow allow 80 units if it was senior, because there wouldn't be, students, there wouldn't be as much traffic, you wouldn't need as much parking, all those types of things.
If you want me to write, you would write it in as a separate use with separate.
Yeah. I think that's the
area
potential way to get
requirements.
it done.
Does the board want to do that? If you want, does everybody agree that I should try to write something like that in?
But given the notion that of the worry about having too many additive stuff, so when you get, someone who gets a little bit smart alecky and decides to have, moderate income plus senior housing plus whatever, and they end up with some kind of, we come up with a monster in terms of coverage.
I was thinking the same thing, but I thought you have to pick one. You can pick either senior or moderate.
One from column A, yeah.
Right, one here, one here.
But you know, there's an awful lot to be said about for having moderate income housing for seniors.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely.
You know, so you don't want to say pick one or the other.
No, but we just want to have,
Come up with a number that you feel like I did when we came up with the density limits. Come up with a number that even when you add the bonus on, you're still comfortable with that number. So that's what you would have to do.
I mean, I think we should at least take a shot at it.
Yeah, no, I like the idea.
I think it's a great idea.
Concept.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm ready to pack up
Okay.
my boxes.
Go through then a few other issues. I mean, because there were a bunch of other issues on the zoning.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
I certainly, you know, been talking about the senior need for senior in some way, shape or form. So certainly I'm supportive of, you know, you're taking a crack at.
Okay, let me fool around with it, fool around with the numbers. Okay, this is not so much anything you guys have to understand, but I know that the letter from the Strawberry Lane people asked, you know, where did we get this student generation number from, you know, from whatever source, and I want to explain where it came from. Larry and Larry got from the school district the number of students that come from I think it was about 7 of the multifamily projects in Irvington, and based on that, the average number of pupils per unit was 0.2. The greatest number, and I did a calculation based on 0.2, which would get us, if everything was built out, 33 additional students. Or the highest, the very highest on that list, assuming this might be the highest, was 0.3. And then using that 0.3 student generation factor, if everything was built out, you could get 50 students. Now, just to make sure, I talked to Ashley Lay from AKRF today to find out what, I know there are these other factors, like Rutgers has one that they use that a lot of people rely on, but it seemed to me the most reliable thing is what's going on now in Irvington, which is how we came up with those numbers. And the generation factor that they've been using is 0.1 students.
Yeah.
And there was just a project done, and she sent me something from Mamaroneck. Mamaroneck just did a school projection from all their multifamily. The number was 0.1. And in Rye, it was 0.1. So the 0.2, 0.3 is a very high number, so people can be comfortable with that. Okay, so I just wanted to clear that up.
Good, that's good.
Marianne, could I just ask you quickly, because I don't remember these numbers, and if you have them on the top of your head, fully built out, how many units could be under the current plan built on each of these 3 properties?
Hold on a minute.
Was it a total of 167 or something?
I think it came to 170. Wait a minute, I have so many darn.
Yeah, this is with all
Hold
the
on a
bonuses.
second.
I think,
167, you said?
That was just a guess.
With the maximum, assuming everybody took the 20% bonus. 133, 149, 31, 101, 168.
Very good, Tom. Wow. Okay.
I was
And that's
close.
including, yeah.
Oh, I didn't even
couldn't
hear
get
what
that
you
last
said.
bonus unit.
I get the last one.
So, okay. All right, then my other question down on my list here is do you want the moderate income defined at 100%, 120, 150? I guess maybe you have to think on that some more.
I think it's clear that the 150 number doesn't make sense to me at least.
Know.
The 100 and the 120 makes sense. I don't know if there's some room for an 80, but that sounds like from anything I've heard, you need financing to make 80 work.
Right.
Somewhere in this conversation, somebody said 90 to 100 was workforce. So something over 100 would be moderate, right? If 90 to 100, I don't know, nothing is.
Well, I mean, the workforce, that's just what the municipalities call it. I mean, it's not, I don't know, what do you want me, can I get you more information on that? What it is at 100 and what it is at 120?
What is it? 100 and 120? I'm sorry.
Well, remember that the Patrick Normoyle said that at 120%, he had the numbers to build something, and with some projections of taxes and stuff like that, which seemed fairly reasonable. That at 120%, the developer breaks even. They're not going to make money. Maybe they're going to break even at 120%. So it is an incentive. And now I'm repeating myself, it's an incentive to them to say, hey, build one at 120. For every one you build at 120, you can have a market rate unit.
So Tom, is there any way that you might be able to speak with the developer that you've been in communication with, perhaps to make an argument at 100 they break even? In other
Sure.
words,
Sure.
not
I mean,
contradicting necessarily, but
You
showing
understand
us
the point,
numbers.
Tom, right? Do you understand the point?
yeah, no, I totally understand the point. And yes, I will.
The more evidence that we get on these arguments, the easier it is
Yeah.
for us to come
We did
to
our
a number.
best to find out, and that's what we got. But if you've got if Bill Balter has, can say, well, actually, they would break even at 100%. Well, that's good to know. Or they would break even at 90%. I kind of doubt it, but that would be good to know.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. No, is there any other homework that you would like us to? No, I mean, that's not homework, but I'm just wondering whether there's anything useful that the committee, which has already done some work, obviously, and Rose also, but is there anything further that we can provide to you to help move this process along?
Well, the only thing, and I kind of brought it up before, and I know it's not really answerable, I guess, is this issue of which is needed more, the moderate for sale or the rent. Now, we keep hearing there's such a need for rental, but is there perhaps a great need for that other more moderate multifamily owned property that might also be attractive, as maybe even in this pandemic world, that people are looking to actually buy something where they weren't before. So
in your zoning, you can't regulate the form of ownership. So
I'm just interested in which is really more needed. And it would be nice to know, is one more attractive to a developer or not?
Well, again, Tom, I guess maybe you could also do that, in that same vein, research not just what percentage AMI for rental would break even, but perhaps what percentage AMI for sale.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're thinking of giving different incentives for different AMIs for rental versus sale, that could give us some more numbers to work with.
Right.
Right. I see.
The other thing you could ask him.
As long as we got him.
Okay, now I'm actually going to start to take notes. Hold on.
You asked.
Don't worry, we got the notes going.
You asked him. No, just
I can only hold one thing in my mind.
Just ask him about whether he thinks there's incentives to developers to build senior housing.
Yeah, senior. Yeah.
Not assisted living housing, for us old folks.
Okay. Yes, and I have notes that I don't have in front of me from that conversation, but there's absolutely some incentives for developing senior housing. So yeah, no, I will reach out and hopefully, I'll reach out both to Sadie, who's in Tarrytown, and also to Bill, who I hope will get back to me. He certainly did a few times, and otherwise we can reach out to some other affordable housing
Yeah.
developers.
Great.
And,
Tom, it's important for them to understand that we're not talking about housing that the village owns or property that the village has any control over. These
Right,
are properties
right.
owned by people we have absolutely no control over other than our zoning.
yeah,
Okay.
right.
All right, good.
Yeah, no, and obviously what the price of the property is, we may know what they're asking, but we don't know what they're gonna get, and that obviously then affects the profitability, right? So,
Right, right.
do we know what they're asking?
Uh,
It's only one that's on the market at the moment, I think, right? Only Maxon is being actively
Maxon?
marketed.
That's correct.
Maxon.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and yeah. Well, I guess somebody could call and say they were interested and find out, right?
Well, I
don't know.
think it was listed at some point, but I thought it was somewhere in the upper 2 million range, 2 to 3 million, something like that. That was my recollection, but I haven't seen it in a while, so I'm not sure.
I heard there's a place called Market Ridge that's going up for auction.
Right. That's
Right, that's
that's
coming right
another
up on
wild
the
part, and
17th.
that actually could impact the value of some of these other parcels. Because, that's kind of bare bones with infrastructure. Somebody could just go in and start new or build what was planned, but
Well, I don't know. There's an issue about whether they've exceeded their time length of planning board.
I don't think we should get into that here.
no.
All right, I'm going to move on to another issue. I mean, these other issues don't. I mean, you guys are welcome to stay on, but just so you know, they don't relate to affordable or moderate income or anything else. But well, I guess this one sort of does. I thought that Maxon made a good point when they said that besides just allowing more density, you should allow more building, whether it be by FAR or by allowing more coverage, because just because you allow more density, you're going to end up with maybe more smaller apartments. So the question is whether the board would also want to give, let's say, like a 5%. I guess it would either have to be a coverage bonus or an FAR bonus, depending on the property. Remember that the Maxon property, its outer limit was defined, its upper limit was defined by FAR. Not its upper limit, its lower limit. What it was permitted was defined by FAR. For the other properties, it was defined by coverage times 3. So if you were to increase, so the question is, are you interested in letting the buildings be bigger? And if you are, I fooled around with some numbers. I'll tell you what. Janice, you turned off.
Well,
I was going to say, yes, please, let's take a look at that, by all means. It is a good point. And I see exactly what you're talking about. You the coverage, you've got smaller and smaller apartments. So.
Yeah. Worth less and less, yeah.
It nullifies the incentive.
Right, yes. Okay, well, I mean, I don't, it's hard to just throw numbers at you, but what I did do some charts, and I'll email them to you, and you can see. What I did was I figured out, well, what the 20% coverage times 3 is, because the reason I do 20% coverage by 3 is that's the maximum a building could be. Okay, have your 20% coverage and go up 3 stories. It may not, but that would be the max. And then what the number would be if you allowed 25% coverage times 3. So see whether you're comfortable with those. I mean, what it would mean essentially, And I hoped, but they didn't. I thought that some of the drawings that we had gotten from Ashley in the beginning showed different coverages, but there weren't. There were no different building coverages. I think we had a draw something for overall coverage, you know, like driveways and stuff like that, between a 30 and a 35. But with the only drawings we have are of what it would look like at 20%. So we don't have any drawings of what it would look like at 25%. I mean, I'll send you the numbers, but I mean, I don't think that's going to mean much to you. Do you know what I mean?
My question is, does that mean that concurrently the overall coverage goes up by 5%? In other words, you know, we now have a 30% coverage limit, right?
Well, the buildings or the limit is 20%.
Right, and then everything else adds up. There's a 30% overall limit.
Yes, so then they would, I mean, if you're allowing a 25% building, then you'd have to let the other one be, go to 35. So it's a 10% more.
Yeah, I mean, that's to me, I'm getting very uncomfortable with that amount of coverage on the sites. I was thinking if we could keep the overall coverage fixed, then that would force them to start doing underground parking.
Well, how does everybody else feel about that? Bearing in mind that I'm not sure that it's such a bonus if you know what I mean, if you can't make bigger apartments.
I think the concern is that we're getting to a point where we're really shoehorning stuff into the property, and that's got me concerned. I think we're pulling out a thread that is got a lot more consequences that have to be carefully considered.
I mean,
I know you know that. I'm just voicing.
I mean, I think we have to. I mean, I feel we definitely should look at it. You know, where we end up with it, I'm not sure. You know, but I think it's definitely something to look at this point. You know, what the right number is. It's almost like our 150. We have to start somewhere and then figure out what it means.
Well, I have the numbers. I'll send you the numbers. Yeah. But I mean, can you picture what that means? I mean, I can tell you that at the Carafiello building, you know, if you allowed 25% coverage and it went up 3 stories, it could be 131,120 square feet. I mean, do you know what that like? Well, we can't picture what it looks like. I don't think.
No, but we might have to, you know, do some more work on it then and ask for, you know, planner to make a model again or something. I don't know, but I think it's a legitimate request from the Maxon folks to consider it. So.
Yeah, and I don't see it so much as just a request from them to help them out, but it just objectively it makes sense.
Right. You know, and again, I share Mark's concern about things getting out of hand in terms of coverage, but we're now looking at things a little bit differently than we did when we were first drawing up these limits and these numbers. Now that we're thinking, you know, more specifically towards a particular goal of multi-family housing. So, you know, I agree with Brian that I think we should at least look and see what these numbers look like, and perhaps have to get some, you know, some drawings or have Ashley back involved again so we can see it again. You know, even though we did this, you know, a year and a half ago, it was a different, you know, concept, and we had different priorities at that time.
What sort of, if I were going to ask her to do a depiction, what sort of drawings would you want? Is it enough to have those blocks like she did, or?
I think
really, because the thing that I'm thinking about is the only way you could mitigate it is by, you know, I mean, I don't mean to jump too far ahead, but you could have some kind of differential about where FAR doesn't have to be by 3 stories. I guess what I mean is you could have like the 3rd story have to be set back or have to have not partake of the bonus or something like that. You could do something to somehow break up the facade and the bulk of the building as it appears from Broadway. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. You know, you're thinking of it as, okay, we're going to give a 5% bonus and it's 3 stories, 5% bonus. It's like a, it's like a rectangular cube kind of thing that's added on. But maybe there's a way to sort of manipulate the bulk requirements such that it doesn't have that same effect visually from Broadway, for instance.
That's something that you could write into the zoning by saying like the 3rd floor can't come out all the way. I don't know.
Well, we already have it, don't we, with the 250 versus 300 setback? Isn't there
Yeah,
some-
well, yeah, but then if you're going to do that, if you're letting them make the building bigger, but you're saying you want setbacks further up, then the coverage has to be even bigger to make up for it.
There's the rub.
Yeah.
It's an interactive thing, and it should be like something that can be modeled a little bit enough to sort of see where there's a balance point that makes sense.
Balance is the word that keeps coming up over and over and over in discussions. You're balancing all sorts of design considerations, space considerations, the goal of affordable housing, the goal of senior housing, and it is not abundantly evident and clear that there's only one way. We've taken a long time in this, and it's obvious we haven't solution tonight. We need to just keep looking, I think, at all the possible ways this can work and consider the implications and how to, not to make everybody happy, but how to get as most buy-in as possible and reasonable achievement of the goals we all share.
All right. Okay, I guess maybe that's something I ask Ashley to try to come up with some depiction. I don't know. Larry, Shopper, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not going to be easy because everyone wants a rendering, and that's really just unrealistic. So I think, let's discuss it with her and see what the best way might be. I don't know.
Okay. And then, at some point, we have to do it now because it's getting kind of late. I think, on the moderate income, that article at the end, I think you all should go through it provision by provision and see that you're comfortable with it. In large measure, I followed the affordable housing, the affordable housing article, but there's a few things that are different. And so, take a look at it and see if there's, I don't want to take up time reading each of those things now, but there's one thing that came up. Oh, I guess maybe Dave Smith raised it. And that was like on your affordable housing provision, you say that the affordable units can be smaller than the market rate units. And you don't have that provision for the moderate income. And I thought we discussed that specifically. And I remember the board actually, the whole board agreed, but it was Brian's thinking that no, you shouldn't. They should all be the same size, because if you're going to have apartments that cost that much, they're not cheap apartments. They should be the same size.
But the finishings could be different.
Yes. The finishings could be different, right? But But that came up, and I just wanted to, it was presented as if it was overlooked, and it wasn't overlooked, but I just want to make sure you guys want to keep it that way.
I think that there's I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll follow.
I think it's worth considering making it apartment size somewhat variable, because that's another way of giving an incentive. If you could fit, I'm making up numbers here, so forget the square footage, but if you could fit 4 affordable units in the same space as 3 market rates, that's a way of getting more affordables without increasing the footprint.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying that's exactly what I was going to say.
Oh, there you go. See, as usual, Mark and I are in entire agreement.
Oh, so that the market rate could be, let's say, 80% of the size of the, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
exactly.
moderate income. Now, Brian, you had an issue with that. Do you remember?
I think that it wasn't with the affordable units so much as it
No,
was.
not affordable. We're talking about moderate income.
Yeah, I mean, just because, I just think that you're going to be paying a fair amount of, what seems like market rate to us, like even if you look at the numbers that, we got from the Noonan, or from Deb earlier, if you're paying, at 120%, $4,200 a month, how much smaller, or $4,150 a month, how much smaller of an apartment do you want? It's like, I think it depends, to me, it's maybe it's, if it's 95% or 90%, but I don't know if that gets you anything. So I just don't know how, if that's a feasible thing to charge someone just slightly less than market rate and then give them a half size apartment. Does it work? I don't know. I don't know what. I'm sure again there's probably a balance. It could be 85% and you're charged 85% or whatever. So it's.
Or Brian, maybe this is the smaller apartments for senior living. I don't know.
One small.
That's a thought. That's a thought.
Yeah.
Wasn't that how they worked it out with Marker Ridge? Weren't they putting 4
Yeah.
units into
Yeah,
attached
that's how we
housing
do it.
that
Yes, that's
they were
how
gonna-
we do it. Yeah, no question. That's how we do
Yeah.
it with the affordable, and it's written in the code that way.
But it's just more
But the board decided they didn't want it, when we
For
had
the
this
moderate,
discussion, they didn't want to do that for the moderate income.
But I mean, I don't need to die on this hill. That's for sure. If everyone else wants to do it, I really don't have a strong feeling. It just.
Well, I just think we should consider it not fully baked, but maybe as a possibility to look at to see what the trade-off with coverage.
Just one more thing to put in the mix. Of the various ways you balance, what you trade off, where you give to get, just one more thing that's a possibility.
Yeah, I don't think somebody who's paying, a little less, I don't think it's a big turnoff if that yours is a little moderate and it's a little smaller. So I'm okay with looking at that as part of the flexibility.
It just means you don't get a hot tub in the master bedroom.
Yeah, thank God.
Or hot tub and no storage.
Yeah, that's not negotiable.
All right, well, that's all I have for now, and I think that probably gathers, I looked at the correspondence from the last, couple months, and I think that covers pretty much all the issues.
Right.
I'm sure we'll hear more. Is this continued Monday, Larry?
Well, the hearing's still on, so.
Yeah, okay, so I'm sure we'll hear more Monday, so, okay.
All right, that's it. Okay.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for all the work.
Absolutely.
Oh, this was
Thank you.
extremely helpful.
And
get-
thanks for your
You get to
contribution.
do homework. That's,
Yeah,
that's all the
thanks for
fun of
doing the
it.
research.
Yeah.
And if there's anything else you're trying to find out, at this point, I think we can maybe find it more easily than you could find it. So, just let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got it.
Great.
There are several affordable units or affordable projects in Westchester that are aimed directly at seniors. So they do exist. So
So,
we'll
yeah,
take a look at those too, but
as
I don't know,
long
that's what we get.
yeah, as long as they don't have to be like on 20 acres. And
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think they're relatively large, but maybe not all. We can look.
None of the other stuff in Westchester is similar to what we're talking about. I mean, I looked at a lot of them. It's not similar. But doesn't mean you can't do it. But I mean, there's not a model out there for us.
right.
Right.
All right, Nick.
And with anything involving seniors, you have to remember too, that we have a volunteer ambulance corps and so forth. And it always goes back to that issue. We've got limited services available for seniors. And I know we're talking about so-called healthy seniors, but seniors have a higher rate of accidents and everything else.
Yeah, it's a good point, Ken.
But no school use, so everything's a yin and a yang, right? Not as many
Very true.
cars, it's like, everything's a trade-off.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. So I'm
Thanks,
gonna,
guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you
stick
again.
around, but I'm gonna put you back in the audience, if you will.
Okay,
Yeah.
bye.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
So,
Enjoy the snow.
the update on public access to Matheson Park. Larry and I had a quick discussion about some of the research we had done. So we just thought we could kind of share some of that, some of the information that we found out. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to share as well, Larry, or anybody else, but that
Oh,
was-
yeah, well, I had a long conversation this afternoon with David DeLucia. He's the facilities director for all the county parks. So you guys share, and I don't want to go through my 45 minutes of what I learned from him, but maybe, if Larry Shopper and one of you want to do a little call tomorrow or something, I could review everything that I, learned from him. I don't
Sure.
want to do it all now.
Okay. So Larry Lonke, did you want to maybe start or?
Sure. Geez, I feel like I have the trifecta between the farmers market and the housing committee and now the parks today.
You're dominating our call.
Well, I wanted this to get done again because I still feel that we have a bit of time constraint if we really want to try to come to some conclusions and, attempt to, consider this within our budget planning for if and what we think we want to do about Matheson. So what I did in the last week or so was I spoke with the rec superintendent, Parks and Rec superintendent and a trustee, both from Briarcliff and from Dobbs Ferry. And the first thing I would say, and I think I've said it to everyone before, is, it's interesting that the trustees are coming from a different place than the Rec and Parks people are. The Rec and Parks people are the boots on the ground that sort of have to implement what the trustees think is a nice thing to have done, So while the Briarcliff Waterfront Park is really not as comparable to Matheson, I felt there were still some things which were important enough to consider. So starting talking to the trustee, what was similar is that Briarcliff had until recently an extremely strict law on the books that limited use of any of their facilities to residents only, written in the law, excluding the use of any park or any recreation facility. And the trustee was honest with me. He said basically over the recent past with what's come on publicly, with rallies which happened in different villages and things, that was brought to the board's attention. And while the policy on the ground was very similar to what our policy is now, up until now, where, it's on the books that it's residents only, but we don't enforce that rule. The trustees were very uncomfortable with the idea of having a rule on the books that, it's on the books, but we don't, enforce it at all. So what they did were, from the trustees' end, were a couple of things. One, in their minds, they separated the parks from the rec facilities. They had the same question that we had about what the limited resources were, but they had it easier than we do because their limited sources were in their rec facilities, and there were no limited resources in their parks. So it was easy enough for them to take all the resident-only rules out of their parks laws, and then say, for our limited facilities like tennis and field use, you have to get a permit. And to get a permit, you have to pay money If you're a non-resident, the permit has to have your photo on it. I mean, it's a fairly restrictive use of a limited facility. So again, while it's not exactly the same as Matheson, what is similar, again, is that they are dealing with their view of limited resources with permitting and some type of limited access to non-residents, while they have totally opened their parks to the public. Now, all they did to open their parks to the public was rewrite their law. They didn't, have an enterprise article about it, and they didn't have anything else that really went and happened about it. There's still no enforcement before this law changed or after this law changed. They have no monitors. They have no, areas where people are looking at things. There's no cleanup involved because everything is carry in, carry out. The one issue that they had in their Hudson River Park, where they had some complaints from some residents, was that there was a tremendous amount of fishing going on, and their effort to control that was by posting a sign that limited the hours that fishing was available. So they again are not, as I said, monitoring things. They have no employees who are, instructed to go and look at these things. And again, as I said, carry in and carry out for garbage, so there's no big garbage, issue going on there. The other thing that they did in their new law, specifically because they are now opening their parks to all residents and non-residents, was that they added a limitation of liability to their parks law that basically stated, I guess, that the park user assumes liability. And I think they did that with the thought process that there'd be a lot more non-residents coming in to the park. Dobbs is a little bit different. Again, it's not exactly the same, because when Dobbs did their renovation to their waterfront park, they took outside money, which obligated them to open their park to the public. They didn't have really a choice in what to do. And the trustee that I spoke with there, said it has been and continues to be an issue. He said every 3 to 4 months, the board has to deal with an issue that comes up. And the reason is essentially because they've opened it to the public and they have no monitoring of anything. They have no ability to restrict access to the park because it's a wide open park. It's wide open access. It's not like there's a gate the way Matheson has a gate. They attempted initially to control access by their parking, because evidently Dobbs Ferry controls all the train parking. I guess it's not Metro North controlled, but it's Dobbs Ferry controlled. And they originally, when they started, limited it to 25 parking spots available for use in the parks, and it was limited to 4 hours. They received pushback from the few groups in the village. The Friends of the Waterfront Park, are a group who I think helped provide some of the funding when renovations were done. So they've opened up more spots. It's very busy on the weekends. Anecdotally, he said they hear from lots of residents who feel that they just can't go down there on the weekends because it's so, it's used. They had more problems when COVID came around, and they actually did limit in some way, at least they stated that there was a limit to access to the park. But again, they have no budgeting for monitoring of their park. There's no alcohol allowed in the park, but again, it's not monitored. The only time alcohol is allowed is that they have jazz concerts in the summer. And they know for a fact that it increases the burden on DPW. The only overall site, oversight that happens is when the police are called. When if and when something's happened, he couldn't tell me whether there was a increase in police calls or what the number of police calls were. What's similar to Dobbs Ferry's Park as compared to Matheson is they do have picnic areas. They have picnic areas that are not monitored. They have picnic areas that are not given permits or any priorities to. And the trustee felt that, you know, all in all, it works out. So then you talk to the Parks and Rec person in Dobbs Ferry, and they think it's a mess. They feel that there's 4 hours every Monday to take DPW to clean up the mess and the garbage that happens, you know, over the course of the weekend. There's no monitoring of, you know, of these limited resources. You know, and again, unless there's some kind of argument where the police are there, there's nothing to watch, you know, and to monitor. Then again, they have no staff on duty, and they have no ability to limit access, even if they wanted to, because of the sort of design of the park. So that's what I heard as a report, you know, and sort of my feeling about what I've heard from that, you know, is that we have an opportunity here to open the park. We don't have an obligation to open the park, but we have an opportunity, and we have a stated desire to open the park. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have some kind of monitoring. We have the ability to monitor limited resources. We don't have to have a guard at the gate, and we don't have to have a monitor at the gate, but we could have an ambassador at the gate. We could have a welcoming person at the gate. We could have someone who is, you know, present to welcome people to the park. And by the way, you know, your group has a permit, and your group is going to be using, you know, barbecue grill number 1 and 2, and have a great day and enjoy it. So, you know, my feeling is that, you know, and again, a lot of the letters which we received in favor of opening the park, you know, did recognize that the recreation department is going to need whatever aid and whatever help we can really afford them. And I think we should consider, at least in the beginning, you know, opening the park, but giving the budgeting that you know, rec would require to be able, one, to do some kind of reservation system for the limited resources, and again, to have, you know, at least on the weekends. I don't think this is really an issue at all, you know, during the week, but at least on the weekends. The other thing I think that we really need to do, which, you know, I didn't, and I think we need to reach out, but we have to have the Irvington Police Department and the DPW, you know, involved in the thought process in terms of budgeting, but also perhaps have them reach out to their peers, you know, particularly in Dobbs Ferry, where it's a very similar situation with no monitoring. And, you know, and again, you know, my argument would be that we could have a very similar situation, you know, and a successful situation with some kind of monitoring. I think that's all my notes.
Larry, a question. You were speaking about Dobbs Ferry. You were speaking only about Dobbs Ferry, or did you start out talking about a different community?
No, first it was Briarcliff. The first part was Briarcliff.
And then, okay.
You know, and again, I thought that what was, you know, similar about Briarcliff was that they were changing a law that was residents only to opening it to all, yet, you know, it wasn't similar enough with the use of the particular park.
Okay, thank you.
I have a lot of notes. I talked to the mayor of Tarrytown and the administrator from Sleepy Hollow, who actually was also the former head of the rec in Dobbs Ferry. So he had some views on Dobbs Ferry as well. I don't think that any of my notes actually disagree with anything Larry said in his summation. So I probably don't need to share them all. You know, Tarrytown has always been open to everyone. The mayor said in his, you know, 25 years has never seen any issues. He thinks that there's no monitors. The police stop by, but they typically stop by just to meet with the people, is the way he put it, and they just kind of interact, and it's great. from both a community policing standpoint as well as, you know, enjoying the park. He said that they do have barbecues in pavilions, and those are residents only. And residents rent them out for a nominal fee, either online or in person. And they typically have 20 to 30 people in the pavilion, is what he said. Sleepy Hollow, they actually run the county park there. So I think the only thing that added to what Larry said was his recommendation was we limit groups. The only time they ever had problems was when the county allowed large groups, like 1,000 people for, you know, ethnic festivals and things. And then the park would be so full that people couldn't really use it. So they changed it so you can't have more than 50 people in a group, and they haven't had any complaints at all. So that was his one big takeaway that isn't kind of included in the things Larry said. But again, I think the bottom line is that, you know, potential, if you manage things, you know, you can, you know, anything can work. I think it was the short takeaway I got from the two conversations I had.
Well, I won't, you know, I won't go over my whole thing either, but the idea of a new park added to David's sense that what he called a seasonal, I like the ambassador term, by the way. He didn't say that, but that kind of position in Matheson, at least in the first couple of years, 2 years, he said, that you'd want that extra staff person who would not be there just to, you know, like be a gate person, but because it's a new facility, you just want to do a lot to maintain it and, you know, kind of have a presence there. He also, he had lots of examples of different parts across the county, but he mentioned things like there's not a sense in his mind that a whole lot of people would necessarily be coming to the Irvington Park. He mentioned it doesn't have a specific different thing. Like he mentioned a lighthouse, for example. There's not a one thing that would attract all kinds of people who have parks near them anyway. So there's a lot more to what he said, and if I could have a conversation tomorrow with either Larry Lonke and Larry Shopper, I'd like to, some of my notes get into somebody else's ear. If I can give you a call sometime tomorrow or something, that would be great.
Well, if it's a snow day, I'm around. If it's not a snow day, I have work, so we'll see.
Okay.
So I didn't speak to anybody. I wasn't really able to do phoning, but it was obvious from the spreadsheet that we had that the county parks are all much larger, that it was the ones that are roughly the same size or comparable size and had similar sorts of amenities were concentrated in Briarcliff, Hastings, Ossining, Sleepy Hollow, and Dobbs. So I think we've covered most of that, except did anybody speak to Ossining? And Connie, I know you had said you would do Hastings, but I'm more than.
Yeah, I emailed the one guy in Hastings, but he didn't answer me.
Okay.
So.
So, and the other place that is somewhat similar is Nyack. I was looking for places that had barbecue grills, that did not have a pool, because that's a whole different kind of issue. So I could do Nyack and what's the other one I just said? Ossining? Ossining, right? Nobody else is doing Ossining?
I'm going to talk to Elmsford, but I don't think they're really comparable, but I figured it's a neighbor, so why not?
So, you know, again, I just sort of want to reiterate, and, you know, and again, I don't want to push or rush the process, but, you know, as I reported to you the last time when we spoke, you know, Joe Archino and RPAC are sort of waiting to hear from us. They want to know what we think they should do. I don't think they need us to micromanage, you know, what time of the day the barbecue grills can be reserved by, but I think giving them, you know, sort of general ideas of what we've agreed to And certainly the ideas that are going to require budgeting, in terms of aid from DPW for cleanup, hiring an ambassador, as I think it's a great word, and he can wear a bright red shirt or, let's make it a bright green shirt. And a welcoming person, not a person
The
that
shirt
can
says
be viewed,
welcome.
right? But again, the thing I keep coming back to, and in speaking to Brian about his experience and talking and speaking to the people I spoke to, it's never going to be as bad as the people who think it's going to be bad, but it's never going to be as perfect as the people who think it's going to be perfect. And as Larry always says, anything can be managed if we know what it is that we're managing. And if we can see where these other parks, and I'm particularly looking at Dobbs because it's so close to what we have and what we'd like to have, and all of their issues that they have, whether it's from the trustee end of what he's hearing or from the, like I like to say, boots on the ground end, it's because they don't have staffing for it. They just don't do it. And whether they've, it's a budget, I'm not going to make that decision for them as to why it is, but we have the opportunity with a brand new park. And again, I'm not going to disagree with what the Westchester County guy said, but I think our new playground and our new splash pad is going to be a draw, at least, over certain months, certain weekends over certain months of the year, as that water splash pad thing. And that's going to need monitoring. It's not going to be something that we're going to say you need a reservation and non-residents can't use it, but there's going to be an accessibility issue to that at certain points. And that's what a greeter can, or an ambassador can come and do and, help to make sure that, kids are moving through it and not, and not staying too long.
No, I think when he said, because it's new equipment and it's a new place, you need that kind of person. So I'm agreeing with you, but that this sense that there would be such a horde of people that would come for a feature, that he would be,
Right. Well, like I said, I don't think it's going to be either of those extremes.
Yeah, right. So if I can, I don't know, Larry, if like 9 o'clock or something is a good time, I'd really like to go through these notes with you. Or just,
Well,
I don't care.
If it's still snowing, I'm around. If it's
Yeah.
not snowing, I'm probably shoveling at 9 o'clock tomorrow.
Oh,
morning,
well, it
but
could
we'll
be
see.
earlier, may not up at 4 in the morning, so.
As I recall, you two were up at 4 in the morning.
Yeah,
We are, yeah. All right.
Sure.
All right, it'll be earlier than 9 then. I'll call you. Okay. But if Larry Shopper, you want to join in, by all means.
Join in, yeah, just whatever.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, just send around a text and we'll coordinate a time.
All right, good. All right. All right. Thanks. Is that it?
All right.
Well, so is that it on Matheson Park then, or? Okay, so if that's it, then I think we had talked about the idea of meeting with Mary Ann, but I think given the time, the topics that we were going to talk about, we can probably do pretty easily on Monday.
Okay.
Monday's agenda is not super long, so at least I don't think it will be. So probably better off doing it on Monday.
Okay,
Okay.
that's great. Thank you so much.
Right.
All right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nice to
Boy.
meet you all.
Boy, I feel like this was my meeting today. That was
was.
really exciting.
It was a very
Good night.
productive.
Okay, good night, good night.
Good night, all.
Good night, everyone.